The nightmare began not with a sound, but with a smell. It was the phantom scent of damp earth and rust, the cloying, metallic tang of blood already spilled. For April Windsor, sleep was no longer a refuge, it was a drowning room. In the suffocating blackness of her subconscious, she was back in that place of cold stone and colder fear. Callum was there. Not as he was in life arrogant, cruel, alive, but as a grotesque monument to her sin. His face, chalk-white and slack-jawed, loomed from the darkness, eyes like vacant craters staring through her, accusing her. The ghost of a scream, his last, tore through the dreamscape, a sound so visceral it felt like it was ripping from her own throat. It was followed by the sickening, percussive thud of metal striking flesh and bone, a sound that echoed the frantic, panic drumming of her own heart. She saw her own hands, pale and trembling, but they were not her hands. They were the instruments of a monster, stained with a guilt so profound it felt like a physical grime she could never wash away. April awoke with a silent, choked gasp, her body drenched in a cold sweat that felt as icy as grave dirt. Her bedroom, usually a sanctuary of teenage life with its posters and fairy lights, felt like a cage. The shadows in the corners seemed to coalesce, taking on monstrous shapes. She could hear her own breathing, ragged and desperate in the stillness of the pre-dawn house. The silence was worse than the screaming in her dream. It was an empty vessel, and her mind filled it with the things she was trying so desperately to forget: Ray's cold, commanding voice, her mother's complicity, the dead weight of a secret that was crushing the very life from her bones. She squeezed her eyes shut, but the image of Callum's lifeless face was seared onto the inside of her eyelids. Sleep was gone. Peace was a forgotten memory. There was only the haunting, and the certainty that it would never, ever end. The air in the sonographer's room at the hospital was sterile, cool, and unnervingly quiet, punctuated only by the soft hum of the ultrasound machine. It was a world away from the chaotic, messy reality of Charity Dingle's life. Lying on the examination bed, a thin paper sheet over her legs and the cold, slick gel on her stomach, Charity forced a smile that felt like cracking porcelain. Beside her, Sarah and Jacob were mesmerized, their faces illuminated by the ghostly gray and black image on the monitor. Their joy was so pure, so absolute, it was a knife twisting in Charity's gut. "And there's the heartbeat," the sonographer said, her voice a calm, professional murmur. A frantic, rhythmic pulsing filled the room. Thump thump, thump thump, thump thump. The sound of a new life. The sound of a time bomb ticking. Ches stood near the door, her arms crossed tightly over her chest as if to physically hold herself together. She watched Charity, not the screen. She saw the tremor in her cousin's hand, the forced brightness in her eyes. This entire scene was a masterpiece of deception, and Chaz feared the canvas was about to tear. "Everything is progressing beautifully," the sonographer continued, moving the transducer across Charity's abdomen. "Growth is perfectly on track. In fact..." She paused, tapping a few keys and bringing up a series of measurements on the screen. That's interesting." The casual words hung in the air, instantly electric. Charity's smile froze. "Interesting how?" she asked, her voice a little too high, a little too sharp. "Well, based on the crown rump length, the fetus is measuring about 5 days ahead of the gestational age calculated from your implantation date," the sonographer explained, oblivious to the grenade she had just rolled into the room. "It's not uncommon for there to be a slight variance, of course. A strong, healthy embryo can sometimes have a little growth spurt." Jacob, ever the intellectual, tilted his head. "So, does that mean the original due date might be wrong? Does it mean conception could have happened naturally, and earlier?" The air was sucked from Charity's lungs. It was an innocent question, born of curiosity, but it was a direct hit. Before she could formulate a lie, Chaz stepped forward, her voice a mask of casual concern. "Oh, you know how it is. These things are never an exact science, are they? As long as the baby's healthy, that's all that matters." She shot a look at Charity, a silent, desperate command: "Say something. Fix this." Charity laughed, a brittle, unconvincing sound. "Exactly. Maybe it's just eager to meet us. Takes after its surrogate mom." Sarah and Jacob accepted the explanation, their attention drawn back to the magical image on the screen. But the seed of doubt had been planted. Later, in the stark, fluorescent-lit corridor outside, the facade crumbled. "That was too close, Charity," Chaz hissed, her voice a low, frantic whisper. "A few more questions from Jacob and the whole thing would have blown up in our faces. Measuring 5 days ahead. Do you have any idea how catastrophic that is?" "I handled it," Charity snapped back, her own fear manifesting as anger. "You got lucky," Chaz countered, grabbing her arm. "This isn't a game. This isn't one of your scams. This is their future, their child. The truth is clinging to you like a shroud, and with every scan, every appointment, a piece of it is going to unravel until you are standing there, exposed. You have to tell them. before they find out from a stranger in a uniform. Charity pulled her arm away, her face a mixture of terror and defiance. "No. I can't. It will destroy them, Charles, it will destroy everything." But as she walked away down the long, sterile hallway, the echo of the baby's heartbeat seemed to follow her, each pulse a hammer blow against the fragile walls of her secret. The Woolpack hummed with the comfortable rhythm of a weekday afternoon. The gentle clinking of glasses, the low murmur of conversation, the scent of ale and polish. It was a picture of village tranquility. And then Kev shattered it. For Aaron Dingle, sitting alone at the bar, the world narrowed to a single, unbearable point of focus. It wasn't just a proposal. When Kev got down on one knee in the middle of the pub, holding out a ring to Robert Sugden, his Robert, forever his in the scarred landscape of his memory, it was not an act of love. It was a performance. A strategic, calculated power play designed for an audience of one, him. Every cheer, every congratulatory clap from the pub regulars, felt like a physical blow. Kev was claiming ownership not just of Robert's future, but of his past, erasing Aaron from the narrative in the most public way imaginable. Aaron's knuckles were white where he gripped his pint glass. He could feel the familiar, volcanic rage building in his chest, a pressure so intense he thought his ribs might crack. Chaz saw it too. She moved to his side, a silent, steadying presence. "Don't rise to it, Aaron. It's what he wants," she whispered. But it was too late. After Robert, stunned and flustered, had mumbled a yes, Kev strode to the bar, his face alight with smug triumph. He stood directly beside Aaron, ordering champagne. "A beautiful day, isn't it?" Kev said, not looking at him but ensuring his voice carried. "A day for new beginnings. For leaving the bitter, pathetic past where it belongs." The snap was audible. Aaron slammed his glass down on the bar with enough force to make the bottles behind it rattle. The entire pub fell silent. "You think this is a game?" Aaron's voice was dangerously low, a gravelly rumble that promised violence. "You think you can just waltz in here, put on this pathetic little show, and threaten me? You're not just marrying him, you're trying to bury me." "Someone sounds jealous," Kev sneered, finally turning to face him. "Move on, Aaron. He has." "This has nothing to do with jealousy," Aaron snarled, stepping closer, their chests almost touching. "This is about you. A bully who hides behind grand gestures. You threatened me in my own home. You think I've forgotten? You think a wedding ring makes you invincible?" The air crackled. The two men were locked in a standoff, a silent war being waged in the heart of the village. It was a promise of future conflict, a line drawn in the sand. But what no one saw was the shift in Aaron's eyes. It wasn't just rage anymore. It was something colder. Something calculating. Later that night, long after the pub had emptied, Aaron drove out to a desolate, windswept spot on the moors, a place where the only sound was the howling wind. He pulled out his phone, scrolling to a number he hadn't contacted in years. A name associated with trouble, with solutions that didn't involve fists or shouting matches in a pub. His thumb hovered over the call button. This wasn't about winning a fight with Kev. This was about ending it. Permanently. He pressed the button. "Adam?" Aaron's voice was steady, devoid of emotion. "It's me. I need a favor. It's about the man who's with Robert." "No, not like that. I need you to find out everything about him. Everything he's hiding. I want to ruin him. I want to leave him with nothing." In the darkness of the moors, a new, far more dangerous war had just begun. Amidst the shadows lengthening over the village, there was one small, incandescent pocket of light. In the pulsating, neon-drenched arena of the Laser Tag Center, Jai Sharma was, for the first time in a long time, simply a father. The weight of his business failures, his anxieties, and his parental shortcomings dissolved under the barrage of harmless laser beams and the sound of his son's delighted laughter. He and Archie moved as a team, ducking behind inflatable barriers, communicating with sharp hand signals and whispered strategies. Jai saw a side of his son he had almost forgotten, confident, joyful, and completely in his element. When they cornered their final opponents, Archie looked at Jai, his eyes wide with excitement, and Jai gave him a nod. Archie burst from cover, unleashing a volley of shots to secure their victory. The triumphant cheer he let out was the most beautiful sound Jai had ever heard. After the game, sticky with sweat and victory, they sat in a nearby ice cream parlor. The tension that had defined their relationship for months was gone, replaced by an easy camaraderie. "You were amazing in there, Dad," Archie said, his mouth smeared with chocolate sauce. "Like a real-life action hero." Jai's heart swelled. "You were the real hero. Our team's MVP," he replied, and he meant it. He looked at his son, truly looked at him, and saw the boy who was slipping away from him. He felt a pang of regret so sharp it was a physical pain. "Dad?" Archie's voice became small. "Do you think Mom would have been good at laser tag?" The question blindsided Jai. He swallowed the lump in his throat. "Yeah," he said softly. I think she would have been the best. She would have been so proud of the young man you're becoming, Archie. I know I am." He reached across the table and put his hand over his son's. "And I'm sorry I haven't been around enough. I've been lost. But that's going to change. I promise. From now on, it's you and me. We're a team. Always." For the first time, Archie's smile reached his eyes. It was a small victory in a world full of looming battles, a fragile moment of grace. But for Jai, it felt like everything. It was a promise he knew he had to keep, no matter the cost. The riverbank should have been peaceful. The gentle flow of the water, the rustling of the autumn leaves. But for April, it was a place of judgment. The water seemed to whisper Callum's name, the wind seemed to carry his final, gasping breaths. She sat on the bench, pulling her sleeves over her hands, trying to disappear. Dylan found her there. His concern was a gentle but relentless probe, seeking out the source of her pain. "April, talk to me," he pleaded, his voice soft. "I know something's wrong. It's more than you being worried about me. Every time his name is mentioned, Ray's name, you flinch. It's like you've seen a ghost. Did he hurt you? Did he threaten you while I was gone? You have to tell me the truth." She wanted to. The truth was a physical thing, a scream trapped in her chest, clawing to get out. But Ray's face swam in her vision, his voice a venomous whisper in her memory. "Your loyalty lies with me and Mum now." "It's nothing," she stammered, the light tasting like ash in her mouth. "I'm just tired. Everything's a mess." "We can fix the mess together," Dylan insisted, his hand covering hers. "But I can't help you if you won't let me in." And then, the temperature seemed to drop by 10 degrees. A shadow fell over them. Touching little reunion. Ray emerged from the path behind them, his presence instantly sucking the warmth from the air. He moved with a languid, predatory grace, a smile playing on his lips that never reached his cold, dead eyes. Dylan immediately stood up, placing himself slightly in front of April. "Everything's fine here," Dylan said, his voice hard. "Is it?" Ray's gaze flickered to April, and she shrank under its intensity. "April looks a bit pale. You're not still upset about that business with Callum, are you, sweetheart? He was a loose end. Sometimes, loose ends need to be tied up. Permanently." He let the words hang in the air, a blatant, horrifying confession disguised as a casual remark. He took a step closer, his focus entirely on April now. "We had a chat, didn't we? About loyalty. About keeping secrets." He reached into his jacket pocket, and for a terrifying second, April thought he was going to pull out a gun. Instead, his hand emerged holding a small, wicked-looking pocket knife. He didn't open it. He just ran his thumb over the smooth, cold steel of the casing. A silent, unmistakable message. "Dylan here is worried about you," Ray continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that made April's blood run cold. "But there's nothing to worry about. Because you're a smart girl. You know that some secrets are so dangerous, they can bury everyone involved. You wouldn't want that to happen, would you? You wouldn't want to cause any more trouble for your poor mother. Or for Dylan." He glanced at Dylan, and the implication was clear. "Your silence keeps him safe." He put the knife away. "Good. Glad we're all on the same page." He patted April's shoulder, a gesture that felt like a brand, and then walked away, whistling a jaunty, carefree tune that was the most terrifying sound she had ever heard. Dylan turned to her, his face a storm of confusion and dawning horror. "April. What the hell was that? What secrets?" But April couldn't speak. She was frozen, trapped in a nightmare from which she could not wake. Ray hadn't just threatened her. He had chained Dylan to her secret, turning the person she wanted to confide in into a potential victim. She was utterly, completely alone. That evening, the Windsor Dingle house was a hollow shell. Marlon's cheerful attempts at conversation, the smell of dinner cooking, the television murmuring in the background, it was all just noise. A flimsy curtain draped over the screaming void inside April's head. Ray's threat echoed on a loop, each word a new nail in her coffin. "I will shut you up for good." She saw it now. There was no escape. There was no outrunning this. The guilt over Callum was a cancer, but Ray was the executioner. He would never let her go. She would spend the rest of her life as his puppet, a prisoner in her own skin, until the day her secret finally destroyed her. Or until he decided she was another loose end. A sudden, terrifying clarity washed over her. There was only one path left. It was a path of mutual destruction, a path that would burn her world to the ground, but it was the only path that led out of Ray's shadow. She fled to her room, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She locked the door, her hands shaking so violently she could barely turn the key. She collapsed onto her bed, pulling her phone from her pocket. Her fingers, numb and clumsy, scrolled through her contacts. They flew past the names of her friends, past her mother's name, past Dylan's. They stopped on one name. Dad. Marlon. Her kind, loving, innocent father. The one person in the world she had tried to protect from all of this. Telling him would shatter his heart. It would implicate her mother. It would ruin their family forever. But the alternative? The alternative was to let the monster win. To live in this silent, screaming hell for the rest of her life. Tears streamed down her face, hot and silent. She took a shuddering breath, a sound that was half sob, half surrender. This was it. The end of everything. Her thumb hovered over the green call icon. It was the most difficult, most terrifying decision of her young life. With a final, choked cry, she pressed it. The screen changed. Calling Dad. The phone started to ring, the electronic tone cutting through the silence of the room. 1 ring. 2 rings. Each one was a lifetime. Each one was a step closer to the abyss. The screen went black. The story hangs there, suspended on the sound of a ringing telephone, promising that by the time it is answered, nothing in Emmerdale will ever be the same again. The second ring was a shriek, the third a death knell. On the fourth, a voice crackled through the speaker, a voice so warm and familiar it was a physical agony to hear. "April, sweetheart. Everything all right?" Marlon's voice was full of the easy, unconditional love that had been the bedrock of her entire life. It was the voice of safety, of home, of a world that no longer existed for her. April opened her mouth, but the words were lodged in her throat, a toxic, impassable mass. She could feel the confession right there, on the tip of her tongue, a single sentence that would incinerate her father's world. "Dad, I killed someone. I killed Callum. Help me." Her lips formed the shape of the word dad, but only a strangled, pathetic whimper escaped. "April? Are you there? I can hear you breathing. Are you crying?" His concern was a hot poker against her soul. He was a good man. The best man. And she was about to ruin him. Suddenly, her phone buzzed in her hand, a violent, intrusive vibration against her tear-dampened palm. A text message notification flashed across the top of the screen, eclipsing her father's name. The sender, an unknown number. The message, 3 simple, chilling words. "I am watching." The air in her lungs turned to ice. It wasn't a guess. It was him. Ray. He was somewhere close, a predator circling in the darkness, and he knew. He knew she was on the verge of breaking. The text wasn't a threat, it was a statement of omnipresent control. He was in her phone, in her house, in her head. There was no escape. "April, for God's sake, say something. You're scaring me." Marlon's voice was rising in panic now. She took a shuddering breath, the words of the text message burning in her mind's eye. The confession died. The monster had won. I'm sorry," she finally whispered, her voice a raw, broken thing. I miss Mum tonight. That's all. I'm sorry I bothered you." The lie was clumsy, pathetic, and she knew he wouldn't believe it. But it was all she had. "Sweetheart, it's more than that, I can hear it." "I have to go," she said, her voice cracking. "I love you." She ended the call before he could reply, plunging the room back into a terrifying silence. She stared at the phone, at the anonymous, 3-word message that held her life in its grasp. She wasn't just a girl with a secret anymore. She was a captive. And her warden was always watching. Downstairs, Marlon stood in his kitchen, the phone still pressed to his ear, listening to the dead air. A cold dread, heavy and formless, settled in his gut. It wasn't just a teenager missing her mom. That was the sound of pure, undiluted terror. And he had absolutely no idea where it was coming from. Celebration was a bitter poison. In the warm, golden light of the Woolpack, champagne flutes chinked together. Robert Sugden was radiant, his face alight with a genuine, uncomplicated happiness that Aaron hadn't seen in years. He laughed, leaning into Kev, who draped a proprietary arm around his shoulders. They were the picture of domestic bliss, the kings of their own small, perfect kingdom. For Aaron, watching from the shadows of the bar, it was like staring into the sun. It hurt to look. Every cheer, every smile directed at the happy couple, was a shovelful of dirt on the grave of what he and Robert once had. This wasn't just a celebration of their future, it was the public desecration of his past. He was nursing a whiskey, the amber liquid burning a slow, steady path down his throat, but it couldn't touch the inferno of rage and grief in his chest. He was about to leave, to escape the suffocating spectacle, when Kev detached himself from the crowd and approached the bar. He ordered another bottle of champagne, standing so close to Aaron that he could smell the cloying scent of his aftershave. "You should have won with us, Aaron," Kev said, his voice smooth and laced with insincere magnanimity. "To new beginnings. No hard feelings, eh?" Aaron didn't look at him. He stared at his own reflection in the dark wood of the bar. "I'll pass." "Suit yourself," Kev shrugged, but he didn't move away. He leaned closer, His voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur meant only for Aaron. "You know, the thing about building something new is that you have to clear the land first. Get rid of all the old, rotten foundations. Otherwise, the whole structure is compromised." He paused, letting the metaphor sink in. "You understand what I'm saying, don't you? I'm saying it's time to let go of the past. Before it gets demolished." It was a direct threat, cloaked in the language of construction. A warning. "You are the rotten foundation. And I will destroy you." Before Aaron could retort, his phone vibrated in his pocket. He pulled it out, a welcome distraction. It was a text from an unsaved number, but he knew who it was. The message was concise. On it, "The man's name isn't Kev. It's Kieran. And he has a wife and a 6-year-old daughter living in Aberdeen. More to come." Aaron read the message once. Then a second time. A slow, cold smile spread across his face, a chilling, predatory expression that didn't reach his eyes. The rage in his chest didn't vanish. It solidified. It cooled, transforming from a wild, uncontrolled fire into a perfectly honed, razor-sharp weapon. He looked up, catching Kev's eye across the bar. Kev raised his champagne flute in a mocking toast. Aaron simply held his gaze, his new, chilling smile unwavering. The game had just changed. Kev thought he was building a new house. He had no idea that Aaron was about to burn his entire world to the ground, with him inside it. In the quiet of their living room, Sarah was blissfully scrolling through ultrasound pictures on her phone, cooing over the tiny, grainy shape that held all their hopes. Jacob, however, was not looking at the pictures. He sat on the floor, his laptop open, his brow furrowed in concentration. "What are you doing?" Sarah asked, finally noticing his preoccupation. "You've been staring at that screen for an hour." "Researching," Jacob mumbled, his eyes scanning lines of text. "It's about what the sonographer said. The variance in gestational dating for IVF pregnancies." Charity, who had just entered the room with a tray of tea, froze in the doorway. Every muscle in her body went rigid. "It's actually fascinating," Jacob continued, oblivious to her presence. "There's a margin of error, of course. But a 5-day variance is statistically significant. Some studies suggest it can be an indicator of a natural conception occurring just before the scheduled embryo transfer." He looked up at Sarah, a flicker of academic curiosity in his eyes. "Isn't that wild? Imagine if, after all this, your body had just decided to do it on its own. It would be a 1 in a million shot." The teacup in Charity's hand rattled against its saucer, a small, sharp sound in the quiet room. Both Jacob and Sarah turned to look at her. Her face was a mask of strained nonchalance, her smile painted on. "Don't you two have better things to do than get lost in medical journals?" she said, her voice unnaturally bright. "You'll drive yourselves mad with all the what-ifs. The baby is healthy. That is the only statistic that matters." She placed the tray down on the coffee table with a thud. "Honestly, Jacob, you think too much. It's just a growth spurt. A little overachiever, that's all. Now, who wants tea?" She was deflecting, redirecting, a master of emotional sleight of hand. Sarah bought it instantly, turning her attention to the tea. But Jacob's gaze lingered on Charity for a moment longer. He saw the flicker of panic in her eyes before she masked it. He saw the slight tremor in her hand as she poured the tea. It was nothing, a tiny, almost imperceptible detail. But it was a thread. And Jacob, methodical and intelligent, had a sudden, nagging urge to pull on it, just to see what might unravel. The most monstrous acts are often committed with a gentle smile. Ray found Marlin in his garden, wrestling with a tangled garden hose. He approached not as a predator, but as a concerned neighbor, his face a perfect picture of empathy. "Marlin, mate. Got a second?" Marlin, flustered and relieved for the distraction, turned around. "Ray. Yeah, what's up?" "I don't want to overstep," Ray began, his voice soft and full of carefully rehearsed concern. "But I saw April down by the river earlier. She seemed incredibly lost. I tried to say hello, but she seemed almost scared. I'm just worried about her. With everything that's happened this year. She's a sensitive kid." Marlin's face clouded with renewed anxiety, Ray's words confirming the fear that had been gnawing at him since the phone call. "You saw that too? She just called me, crying. Said she was missing her mom, but it felt like more. Definitely more." Ray nodded sagely, driving the knife in deeper. "She seems to be carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. Whatever you do, don't push her too hard. Just let her know you're there. She needs her dad right now." It was a masterful, diabolical performance. In 2 minutes, Ray had accomplished 3 things. He had solidified himself in Marlin's mind as a caring, trustworthy friend. He had framed April's terror as teenage angst and emotional fragility, effectively discrediting any future accusations she might make. And he had poisoned the well of her only remaining sanctuary, her father. Now, If she tried to tell Marlon the truth, he would see it through the lens Ray had provided, the ramblings of a troubled, overwrought girl. "Thanks, Ray. I mean it," Marlon said, his gratitude genuine. "It's good to know people are looking out for her." "Of course," Ray smiled. "We're all a community here, aren't we? We look out for our own." From her bedroom window, April watched the scene unfold. She couldn't hear the words, but she didn't need to. She saw her father's grateful expression. She saw the monster, disguised as a friend, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. The last door hadn't just been locked. It had been bricked up from the outside, with her still trapped inside. Night had fallen completely, but it brought no respite. Dylan found April in the kitchen, staring at a glass of water as if it held the answers to the universe. He had been replaying the scene at the river all day. The veiled threats, Ray's chilling smile, April's catatonic fear. He couldn't stand it anymore. He closed the kitchen door behind him, the soft click echoing like a gunshot. "No more lies, April." She jumped, startled. "What? Don't play dumb with me," he said, his voice quiet but intense, stripped of all patience. "I'm not an idiot. Ray has something on you. Something terrible. It's connected to Callum, isn't it?" He said Callum was a loose end. What did he mean? "Did you see something, April? Did you see Ray kill him?" He was grabbing at straws, trying to make sense of the horror he could feel radiating from her. Her silence was his only answer. "Please," he begged, his voice cracking. "I can't protect you if I don't know what I'm protecting you from. Let me help you." "You can't help me," she whispered, tears finally beginning to fall, tracing paths through the exhaustion on her face. "Nobody can." "Try me," he insisted, stepping closer, his own fear and frustration boiling over. "Because I am not going to stand by and watch that psychopath destroy you. Whatever he did, we can go to the police. We can tell them." "No." The word was a raw, guttural scream, torn from the deepest part of her. It silenced him instantly. The room was filled with the sound of her ragged, painful sobs. The dam that had been holding back months of terror and guilt finally broke. She looked at him, her eyes wide with a truth so awful it had nearly shattered her mind. "You don't understand," she choked out, the words tumbling over each other. "You've got it all wrong." "What?" Dylan whispered, confused. "What do I have wrong?" April shook her head, a slow, agonizing motion of despair. Her voice dropped to a barely audible, broken whisper, a confession that would change everything forever. "It wasn't Callum," she breathed. "Ray. He didn't kill him." Dylan stared at her, waiting for the rest, his mind refusing to make the impossible leap. April's eyes met his, and in their depths, he saw the abyss. "I did."